There are disappearances that remain local, known only to a family, a police force, and the community where someone was last seen. And then, there are cases that become almost impossible to escape. Cases repeated across television screens, printed on front pages, debated in parliaments, investigated across borders, and remembered by millions of people who never met the person at the center of them. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann became one of those cases. On the evening of May 3, 2007, a 3-year-old British girl disappeared from a holiday apartment in Praia da Luz, a quiet resort town on Portugal's southern Algarve coast. Madeleine had been sleeping inside with her younger twin siblings. Her parents were dining with friends at a restaurant within the holiday complex. When her mother returned to check the children later that evening, Madeleine was no longer in her bed. There was no confirmed sighting of her leaving the apartment. No ransom demand followed. No person has ever been convicted of taking her. And despite investigations involving authorities in Portugal, Britain, and Germany, Madeleine has never been found. Portuguese police continue to list Madeleine Beth McCann as missing, recording May 3, 2007, as the date of her disappearance. What followed that night would become far larger than anyone could have imagined. Police officers searched streets, holiday apartments, beaches, waste ground, wells, reservoirs, and areas of countryside. Journalists arrived from across Europe. Photographs of Madeleine appeared around the world. Celebrities made public appeals. Footballers displayed her image. Politicians offered assistance. Thousands of reported sightings were submitted from dozens of countries. Most led nowhere. Some were mistakes. Others were rumors. And as the years passed, the search for one missing child became surrounded by competing timelines, disputed evidence, false claims, public accusations, and theories that often traveled much faster than facts. The case became so widely discussed that many people came to believe they already understood it. A child was left sleeping. A door was discovered open. A window was raised. A family claimed an abduction. Police became suspicious. The media chose sides. And somewhere within that storm, the truth became increasingly difficult to separate from everything built around it. But the real story is more complicated, because almost every central question leads to another. Was Madeleine taken from the apartment? Did the person responsible know the family's routine? Was the apartment being watched? Did a stranger enter during one of the gaps between checks? Did something happen earlier than anyone initially realized? Or did crucial mistakes during the first hours allow the most important evidence to disappear? 18 years after Madeleine vanished, Portuguese police carried out another search in June 2025 at the request of German authorities. The Portuguese Judicial Police confirmed that the operation was connected to a German investigation concerning a German citizen suspected of killing Madeleine. Any material collected was to be provided to Germany's Federal Criminal Police Office. But suspicion is not proof. The man investigated by German authorities has denied involvement, and he has not been charged with Madeleine's disappearance. In Britain, the Metropolitan Police investigation known as Operation Grange continues to support the case. The operation began in 2011 after a request from the Home Secretary, because Portuguese authorities retained primary responsibility for investigating what happened on Portuguese soil. For the public, the case is a mystery. For investigators, it is a collection of statements, phone records, timelines, witness accounts, forensic results, and thousands of pieces of information gathered over nearly 2 decades. But for Madeleine's family, it is not a story. It is the absence of a daughter, a sister, a child who should have grown into an adult, but whose life remains frozen in the public imagination at the age of 3. Madeleine Beth McCann was born on May 12, 2003. She lived with her parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, and her younger twin siblings, Sean and Amelie, in Rothley, Leicestershire. Her father worked as a cardiologist. Her mother was a doctor. In photographs released after the disappearance, Madeleine appears smiling, fair-haired, and unmistakably young. Portuguese authorities described her as approximately 90 centimeters tall, with light brown or blonde hair, and a distinctive coloring in her right eye. That eye became one of the most recognizable details in the global campaign to find her. But before the posters, before the televised appeals, before her face appeared across continents, Madeleine was simply a child on holiday with her family. In late April 2007, the McCanns traveled to Portugal with several other families. The adults were friends, many of them medical professionals, and together they would later become widely known in the press as the Tapas 7, with Kate and Jerry making up a group of 9 adults. They stayed at the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz. It was a family-oriented holiday complex, with swimming pools, tennis courts, children's activities, restaurants, and privately managed apartments distributed around the resort. The McCann family stayed in Apartment 5A. It was a ground-floor apartment near the edge of the complex. Unlike a sealed hotel room accessed through an interior corridor, the apartment opened toward public areas. A small patio faced the swimming pool side of the resort. Another entrance faced a car park and nearby street. This location would later become critically important, because the apartment was close enough to the restaurant for the parents to believe they could check on the children during dinner, but it was not continuously visible from where they sat. Walls, vegetation, the arrangement of the buildings, and the position of the table meant that the adults could not simply watch the apartment throughout the evening. During the days before the disappearance, the families followed a holiday routine. The children attended activities organized by the resort. The adults played tennis, relaxed near the pool, and spent their evenings eating together at the Ocean Club's tapas restaurant. Because the restaurant was popular, the group had arranged a recurring evening reservation. The adults would put their children to bed, leave them inside their apartments, then take turns checking on them during dinner. That arrangement has remained one of the most intensely discussed aspects of the case. The parents believed the children were nearby. They believed regular checks would keep them safe. But the children were unattended between those visits. And on May 3rd, one of those intervals became the space in which a child disappeared. The day itself began without any obvious warning. Madeleine and the twins spent time at the children's club. The adults followed their usual holiday activities. There was no known threat, no confirmed confrontation, no message indicating that anyone intended to target the family. Later that afternoon, the family returned to Apartment 5A. The children were prepared for bed. According to accounts given afterward, Kate and Jerry read stories to them, and the 3 children were left sleeping in the same room. Madeleine was in one bed. The twins were in travel cots nearby. It should have been an ordinary bedtime, during an ordinary family holiday. At around 8:30 that evening, the parents joined their friends at the tapas restaurant. From that moment, the case becomes a sequence of movements, checks, memories, and disputed minutes. Different adults left the table at different times. Some checked only their own children. Others listened outside neighboring apartments. One member of the group entered Apartment 5A during a check, but did not look directly at Madeleine's bed. Another member of the party later reported seeing a man carrying a child through the resort area. A different family, walking nearby later that night, would report another sighting of a man carrying a young child. Those 2 sightings would become central to the investigation, then later be interpreted very differently. At approximately 10 o'clock, Kate McCann returned to Apartment 5A. What happened during that check has been repeated countless times, but repetition has not made it less disturbing. Kate entered the apartment. The children's bedroom door, which she remembered leaving partly open, moved unexpectedly. She went farther into the room. A window was open. The shutter was raised. The twins remained in their cots. Madeleine's bed was empty. Kate searched the apartment. Madeleine was not in the parents' bedroom. She was not in the living area. She was not hiding nearby. Then Kate ran back toward the restaurant. Her words would become inseparable from the case. Madeleine's gone. Someone's taken her. Within minutes, friends, resort workers, and local residents began searching. People ran through the complex, called Madeleine's name, checked paths. Gardens, pools, and nearby streets. Portuguese police were contacted. But in those first chaotic moments, Apartment 5A was not preserved as a sealed forensic scene. People moved in and out. Objects were touched. The room where Madeleine had slept became crowded with fear, confusion, and urgency. Every minute mattered. If Madeleine had wandered away, she could be nearby. If someone had taken her, that person might still be close. But no one yet understood what kind of event they were responding to. A missing child? An accident? An abduction? Or something else entirely? By sunrise, there was still no confirmed trace of Madeleine. The beaches, roads, apartment complex, and surrounding areas had produced no answer. The child who had gone to bed in Apartment 5A had disappeared into one of the most heavily examined mysteries of the modern era. In the years that followed, her parents would be investigated. Early suspects would emerge and disappear. Forensic evidence would be interpreted, challenged, and debated. Portuguese police would archive the original inquiry, then reopen it. British detectives would review tens of thousands of documents. German prosecutors would identify a new suspect and declare their belief that Madeleine was dead. Although no one has been convicted, and no definitive account of what happened has been established. But before examining suspects, forensics, media controversies, and the modern investigation, we need to return to Praia da Luz, to Apartment 5A, to the restaurant across the complex, and to the small gaps in time, when Madeleine McCann was still believed to be asleep, but may already have been gone. Because somewhere within the movements of that evening, the truth began, and the first hours of the investigation may have determined whether it would ever be found. To understand what happened to Madeleine McCann, we have to slow everything down. Not by days, or even by hours, but by minutes. Because somewhere within a relatively small window of time, a child disappeared, and every movement inside that window would later be examined by investigators, journalists, and millions of people around the world. The Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz was designed for families. Parents could relax while children attended supervised activities during the day. Holiday apartments were spread throughout the complex, rather than being contained inside one large hotel building. Walking paths connected swimming pools, gardens,
restaurants, and residential blocks.
Apartment 5A sat near the edge of the resort. Unlike a traditional hotel room, it had direct access from outside. The front entrance faced a public street and parking area. The patio doors opened toward the resort itself. Anyone walking through either side could approach the apartment without passing reception. That detail would later become one of the most debated aspects of the entire investigation, because detectives would ask a simple question. If someone intended to abduct a child, how easy would it have been to reach Apartment 5A? During the week-long holiday, the McCanns and their friends developed a routine. Each evening, the children were put to bed around 8 o'clock. The adults then walked to the Ocean Club's tapas restaurant. It was only a short distance away, close enough, they believed, to regularly check on the children. Rather than hiring babysitters each night, the adults agreed to take turns checking their apartments roughly every 15 to 30 minutes. Each person usually checked only their own children, then returned to the table. To them, it felt similar to eating in the garden while the children slept inside the house. Looking back today, many people question that decision. The McCanns themselves have publicly acknowledged that leaving the children alone was a mistake. But on that evening, their focus was not on criticism. It was on enjoying another holiday dinner with close friends. As the sun disappeared over the Algarve, the group gathered once again at the tapas restaurant. Conversation flowed. Wine was served. Plates arrived one after another. Nothing suggested that within the next 2 hours, the holiday would become one of the most investigated events in modern criminal history. At approximately 8:35 p.m., the adults arrived at the restaurant. 9 people sat around the table. Kate and Jerry McCann, Their friends, doctors, parents, holidaymakers. The atmosphere was relaxed. Inside apartment 5A, Madeleine slept in the bedroom alongside her younger twin brother and sister. The twins remained asleep throughout the entire evening, a fact investigators would later find remarkable, given everything that happened around them. At around 9:05 p.m., Jerry McCann left the restaurant for his first routine check. He entered apartment 5A. Everything appeared quiet. The twins were asleep. He believed Madeleine was also asleep. After only a few moments, he quietly left and returned to dinner. As Jerry walked back toward the restaurant, another member of the holiday group, Dr. Russell O'Brien, passed him while heading toward his own apartment to check on his children. The two briefly spoke. Neither realized they had just become part of one of the most scrutinized timelines ever reconstructed. At approximately the same time, another witness entered the story. Jane Tanner, one of the friends dining with the McCanns, left the restaurant to check on her own children.
While walking through the resort, she later reported seeing a man carrying a young child. She described the child as appearing to be asleep. The man walked quickly across the street, wrapped in blankets or light-colored clothing.
The child rested motionless in his arms. At the time, Jane thought almost nothing of it. A father carrying a sleeping child home after dinner was hardly unusual in a holiday resort filled with young families. Only later, after Madeleine had disappeared, did that memory suddenly become enormously significant. For years, investigators considered the possibility that Jane Tanner had unknowingly witnessed Madeleine's abductor leaving the area. Artists produced sketches. Police recreated the man's appearance. The image became one of the most recognizable pieces of the investigation. But investigations rarely remain simple. Years later, British detectives revisited the sighting. After extensive review, they concluded the man Jane had seen was most likely another British holidaymaker carrying his own daughter home from the resort's night nursery. The man came forward. His movements were independently examined, and investigators publicly stated they no longer believed he was connected to Madeleine's disappearance. What had once been considered one of the investigation's strongest leads quietly disappeared. That single development illustrates something important about this case. Many of the details people remember were later challenged, clarified, or completely reinterpreted as new evidence emerged. Meanwhile, dinner at the tapas restaurant continued. People chatted, food arrived, glasses were refilled. One by one, the adults continued making their routine checks. At approximately 9:30 p.m., Matthew Oldfield, another member of the group, offered to check on the McCann children while walking toward his own apartment. Kate accepted. Matthew entered apartment 5A. He later told investigators he listened for movement. He looked into the bedroom. He could see the twins sleeping peacefully. But he did not walk fully into the room. He never physically confirmed Madeleine was still lying in her bed. That detail would become enormously important, because investigators could never determine whether Madeleine was still inside the apartment when Matthew carried out his check, or whether she had already disappeared. If she had already been taken, then the timeline of the disappearance changed completely. The window became much larger, the opportunities became greater, and several theories suddenly became more plausible. Just 30 minutes later, Kate McCann stood up from the dinner table. It was her turn to check the children. She walked the familiar path toward apartment 5A, expecting another quiet visit. A quick glance into the bedroom, a reassuring look at 3 sleeping children, then back to dinner. Instead, she would walk into one of the most haunting moments in modern criminal history. The bedroom door behaved strangely. The room felt different. The twins remained asleep, but Madeleine's bed was empty. Every parent knows that feeling. The instant your heart begins racing, before your mind has even caught up, the desperate hope that the child is simply hiding, or has wandered into another room, or that you've somehow made a mistake. Kate searched the apartment, called Madeleine's name, checked behind doors, looked beneath beds. Nothing. Then she ran back into the darkness toward the restaurant. Witnesses later recalled panic in her voice. Fear, unlike anything they had ever heard. Madeleine's gone. Someone's taken her. Within seconds, dinner ended. Holidaymakers scattered in every direction. Parents searched bushes, gardens, swimming pools, nearby roads, calling the name of a little girl who never answered. No one realized it then, but the first hour after a child disappears is often the most critical. Every passing minute gives an offender more distance, more opportunity, and more time to erase evidence. Before midnight, Portuguese police had arrived. The search had begun, but investigators were about to discover that the first hours of this case would become almost as controversial as the disappearance itself. Because while everyone searched desperately for Madeleine, mistakes were already being made, mistakes that some investigators believe could never be undone. When Portuguese police arrived at the Ocean Club, nobody yet knew whether they were searching for a lost child or investigating one of the most significant crimes in modern European history. The first officers began asking basic questions. What was Madeleine wearing? When had she last been seen? Who had checked the apartment? Could she have wandered outside on her own? Within minutes, holidaymakers, resort staff, local residents, and police officers spread across Praia da Luz. They searched gardens, swimming pools, nearby streets, construction sites, shops, and the surrounding countryside. People shouted Madeleine's name into the darkness, hoping to hear the voice of a frightened 3-year-old. Nothing. As the night continued, the search expanded. Roadblocks were considered. Vehicles were stopped. Taxi drivers were questioned. Hotels were contacted. Nearby hospitals were checked. Portuguese authorities began treating the disappearance as a possible abduction. But while officers searched desperately outside, investigators would later question what was happening inside Apartment 5A. Today,
many experienced detectives believe the first hours of any major investigation are the most important. The earliest evidence is often the most valuable. Footprints, fingerprints, DNA, fibers,
witness memories. Everything is freshest during those first moments. Yet Apartment 5A quickly became crowded. Friends entered. Resort employees entered. Police officers entered. People walked through rooms. Objects were moved. Potential evidence may have been disturbed before a complete forensic examination could begin. To be clear, no one deliberately contaminated the apartment. Everyone believed they were trying to help. But later reviews of the investigation concluded that valuable opportunities may have been lost during those crucial first hours. Investigators also faced another problem. The resort remained open. Guests continued moving around the area. Cars came and went. People packed luggage. Holidaymakers left Portugal over the following days. If the person responsible had remained nearby, the opportunity to leave may already have existed. By sunrise on May 4th, the search entered a new phase. Search dogs joined the operation. Helicopters surveyed the surrounding countryside. Divers examined nearby water. Police searched abandoned buildings, fields, drainage systems, and coastal areas. Every possible place a frightened child might have wandered
was examined. Still, nothing. As news spread throughout Portugal, international media quickly arrived. Television crews gathered outside the Ocean Club.
Satellite trucks filled nearby streets. Journalists broadcast live updates around the clock. Within days, Madeleine McCann's face had become one of the most recognized missing child images in the world. Kate and Jerry McCann made public appeals asking for their daughter's safe return. Their message was simple. If someone had Madeleine, please bring her home. Soon, the campaign expanded beyond Portugal. Airports displayed Madeleine's photograph. Posters appeared across Europe. Television stations interrupted programming. Football clubs displayed appeals before matches. Celebrities, politicians, religious leaders, and members of the royal family all urged the public to help find the missing 3-year-old. The case had become global, and with global attention came enormous pressure. Pressure on investigators, pressure on the media, pressure on Madeleine's family. As detectives worked through hundreds of witness statements, one question continued to dominate the investigation. Was this an opportunistic abduction? Or had someone specifically targeted the McCann family? Investigators examined reports of suspicious people seen around the Ocean Club in the days leading up to the disappearance. Some guests reported seeing individuals knocking on apartment doors, claiming to collect donations for charity. Others remembered unfamiliar men watching holiday apartments. Several reports described people behaving strangely around the resort. Many of those sightings could never be confirmed. Some witnesses disagreed about dates. Others described different individuals. As the investigation grew, sorting reliable information from mistaken memory became increasingly difficult. Meanwhile, Portuguese detectives began reconstructing every minute of May 3rd. Every check made by the parents, every phone call, every walk through the resort, every possible route someone could have used to leave apartment 5A unnoticed. Then, a new development changed the investigation once again. Police identified their first official suspect, a British expatriate living near Praia da Luz named Robert Murat, voluntarily spoke with journalists shortly after the disappearance. Because of his proximity to the resort, his language skills, and information received during the investigation, Portuguese police designated him an arguido, a formal legal status that placed him under investigation. The decision attracted enormous international attention. For many observers, it appeared police were close to solving the case. But appearances can be misleading. Over time, investigators failed to uncover evidence linking Robert Murat to Madeleine's disappearance. His arguido status was eventually lifted. He consistently denied any involvement. No charges were ever brought against him in connection with the case. It would not be the last time public attention focused intensely on a suspect.
Only for investigators to reach a different conclusion later. As weeks turned into months, searches continued. Thousands of reported sightings arrived from countries across Europe,
North Africa, and beyond. Some callers genuinely believed they had seen Madeleine. Others proved to be mistaken identity. Several reports generated major headlines before being ruled out.
Each new sighting created hope. Each dead end created heartbreak. Then, 4 months after Madeleine disappeared, the investigation took its most controversial turn.
Instead of focusing on an unknown abductor, Portuguese police began examining the possibility that the truth might lie much closer to home. The parents, who had spent months pleading for help, would soon become the focus of worldwide suspicion. It was a development that divided public opinion, created years of speculation, and changed the course of the investigation forever. But were investigators following the evidence? Or had the investigation itself begun moving in the wrong direction? That question would become one of the most fiercely debated aspects of the Madeleine McCann case. By September 2007, 4 months had passed since Madeleine disappeared. The investigation had produced thousands of witness statements, hundreds of reported sightings, international headlines, and countless hours of searching. Yet, Madeleine was still missing. Then, the investigation took an extraordinary turn. Portuguese police formally named Kate and Jerry McCann as arguidos,
A legal designation, meaning they were official suspects during the investigation.
The news shocked the world. Only months earlier, the McCanns had become the public face of the search for their daughter. Now, the investigation appeared to be focusing on them. The change was driven largely by forensic findings. British forensic specialists examined evidence recovered from apartment 5A.
The McCann's clothing, and a rental car the family hired several weeks after Madeleine disappeared. Cadaver dogs, specially trained to detect the scent associated with human decomposition.
Alerted in several locations connected to the family. Blood detection dogs also indicated possible areas of interest. Those alerts generated enormous media attention. Many newspapers treated them as proof, but investigators and forensic experts repeatedly emphasized an important distinction. A dog's alert is not evidence on its own. It is an investigative tool, one that must be supported by verifiable forensic findings. DNA testing followed. Some samples were incomplete. Others contained mixtures from multiple individuals. Several results were considered too weak or too degraded to identify Madeleine conclusively. Years later, experts continued to disagree about what those results actually demonstrated. Ultimately, Portuguese prosecutors concluded there was insufficient evidence to charge Kate or Jerry McCann with any crime. Both consistently denied any involvement in their daughter's disappearance. No charges were ever filed against them. In July 2008, Portugal officially archived the investigation. The case remained unsolved. To many people, that felt like the end. But for Madeleine's family, it was only the beginning. Kate and Jerry refused to stop searching. They established the Find Madeleine campaign, appeared in interviews, worked with investigators, traveled internationally, and continued appealing for information, year after year. For them, hope never completely disappeared. Then, several years later, Britain launched its own investigation. In 2011, the Metropolitan Police created Operation Grange. Its purpose was to conduct an independent review of everything known about Madeleine's disappearance. Detectives examined tens of thousands of documents, reviewed witness statements, reconstructed timelines, and identified numerous investigative opportunities that had never been fully explored. One by one, old assumptions were tested again. Witnesses were re-interviewed. Phone records were re-examined.
International police agencies shared information. The investigation was effectively starting over. One important conclusion emerged. British investigators no longer believed that Jane Tanner's famous sighting showed an abductor carrying Madeleine.
Instead, they identified the man as another holidaymaker, carrying his own daughter home from the resort's night creche. A lead that had dominated headlines for years was quietly eliminated. But another lead would eventually reshape the investigation once again. In 2020, German prosecutors publicly announced that they were investigating a German national, Christian Bruckner. At the time Madeleine disappeared, Bruckner had lived in the Algarve region of Portugal. Investigators established that his mobile phone had been used near Praia da Luz on the evening of May 3, 2007. He also had a long criminal history involving sexual offenses, burglary, and crimes against children. German authorities made an extraordinary statement. They said they believed Madeleine McCann was dead, and that Christian Bruckner was responsible. However, they also acknowledged that they did not yet possess sufficient evidence to bring charges relating to Madeleine's disappearance. Bruckner has consistently denied any involvement. As of today, he has not been charged with Madeleine McCann's disappearance. Investigators in Germany, Portugal, and the United Kingdom continue cooperating. Searches connected to the investigation have taken place years after Madeleine vanished. Reservoirs, remote properties, abandoned structures, and areas of countryside have all been examined. Each search has generated hope. None has yet produced the definitive answer investigators seek. After nearly 2 decades, 3 broad possibilities continue to dominate discussion. The first, Madeleine was abducted by a stranger. Supporters point to the open access to Apartment 5A, reports of suspicious individuals around the resort, and the lack of evidence that she ever left the apartment alone. The second, someone familiar with the family's routine, exploited predictable gaps between the parents' checks. This theory does not necessarily require prior knowledge of the McCanns themselves, only observation of the resort over several evenings. The third, alternative theories involving the family or an accidental death. These theories have circulated widely online. But despite years of investigation, no prosecutor has produced sufficient evidence to support criminal charges against Kate or Jerry McCann. Distinguishing speculation from evidence remains essential. The truth is, no court has determined what happened to Madeleine. No one has been convicted. No complete account of that night has ever been established. For millions of people, Madeleine remains the smiling 3-year-old in the pink sun hat, frozen in time. For Kate and Jerry, she is their daughter. Not a headline, not a documentary, not a mystery. A child who never came home. Every birthday passes, every Christmas arrives. Every family photograph carries an empty space that should never have existed. Perhaps somewhere, someone still remembers a detail they dismissed as unimportant. Perhaps new forensic technology will reveal evidence impossible to detect in 2007. Perhaps the final answer already exists, waiting inside a forgotten witness statement.
An overlooked phone record, or a memory someone has been too afraid to share. History remembers this as the disappearance of Madeleine McCann.
But history rarely tells us how ordinary that evening began. A family holiday. 3 children asleep. Parents sharing dinner with friends. Nothing seemed unusual, until one routine check changed countless lives forever. Some mysteries fade with time. This one never did. If you found this documentary informative, consider subscribing to Vanished UK for carefully researched documentaries covering the world's most haunting unsolved disappearances. And if you have an evidence-based perspective on this case, share it respectfully in the comments below. Because after all these years, the search for the truth is still not over.